And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. This is Irreverent, Faith and Current Affairs.
Welcome everyone to Irreverent Faith and Current Affairs. It's the three musketeers back in the virtual studio this week. Me, Jamie Franklin, Tom Pelham and Daniel French this week.
Which musketeer are you, Jamie?
D'Artagnan, of course.
Well, he's not one of the three, though, is he? Is he?
I don't know the name of any of the other characters.
Who's the one who's the secret Jesuit general?
Oh, that's definitely you.
In the film, it's Jeremy Irons plays him. And it has this wonderful line where he says, "The King of France has asked me to hunt out the Jesuit general and eliminate him," which is quite an interesting proposition because I am the secret Jesuit general.
Yeah.
So yeah, there you are.
Secret Jesuit, Tom Pelham.
It's true. Yeah. This Athos, Porthos. I'm looking at Wikipedia for this. I must admit, Athos, Porthos, and Aramis. I've not read it in a long time. I have to reread it again. I don't think
I've ever read it. Is it by Alexandre Dumas? Is that who it's by? I think it is. I'm fairly sure it is.
Well, it's not saying yes. Dumas. Alexandre Dumas. Anyway, they're all very characterful. So D'Artagnan then comes along and joins them. That's it. D'Artagnan comes along and joins them. So there are four of them really. But
cool. Yeah. Well, I'm D'Artagnan anyway.
So your answer to which of the three musketeers, the fourth?
Yes, exactly. I'm the fourth one. Anyway, let's you guys just we won't actually go into like how we are and everything. If you want to know how we are, listen to Uncollared, but you have to become a subscriber to do that. So go to irreverentpod.com and become a Patreon subscriber. You'll hear an amazing update of what's been going on with us, particularly Daniel, who's got a big move coming up, moving to the chaplaincy role in Greenwich. Is it Greenwich?
Greenwich University,
yeah, Greenwich University. Big move coming up there. Tom, you're just in rural Sussex, faithfully plugging away at your ministry, burying, baptizing and marrying people left, right and centre, giving them the gospel, both barrels, etc., etc. So I just want to give a couple of notices before we begin. I'm not here next week, so there won't be a normal episode, but I'm actually on holiday. But I'll put something up. From the archives for your interest. I'm not sure what at the moment, but Any suggestions, chaps? Classic episode from yesteryear. Not sure. Maybe Lord Frost. Maybe put that on. Speaking of which, we actually have I'm doing an interview in person with Lord Frost here in Winchester and inviting people to be present for the recording if they'd like to. You can buy tickets for that event, which is on Thursday, the 18th of September at 7 p.m. I'll leave a link in the show notes. Basically, what it is I'm recording an interview with Lord Frost for the podcast, but inviting people to be there to watch the interview and to ask questions and then to stay for drinks and biscuits afterwards. It's going to be really fun. So if you want to know details about that and book tickets, please look at the link in the show notes. It'd be good to have lots of people there. Lots of people booked in already. There's lots of capacity in the venue where we're doing it. So lots of opportunity for people to come along. And one other thing I should say, I made a bit of a what you might call a bit of a balls up last week because I uploaded the Uncollared episode instead of the main episode where we say all sorts of politically incorrect things because it's behind a paywall, so I can't even remember what we said last week, Tom, but it was assuredly outrageous. Anyway, I did notice the mistake quite quickly and change it. So if that happened, if you got Uncollared instead of the main episode, I do apologize, but it does give you an insight into what you get if you subscribe to the podcast, which is a fantastic bonus podcast and many other benefits as well. So just to say that. All right, those are all the notices. Any notices from either of you?
I'll expect the knock on the door from the police then for my, thought crimes.
Yes, we want to check your thinking, Reverend.
I can't even remember what we talked. When somebody sent me a message saying, "Do you realise you've uploaded Uncollared?" I was thinking, "Oh no, what have we done?" I think we had an argument about Islam. Is what I think happened.
Yeah, we did. We did some questions. It was mostly just questions. It was extended question the Rev, really, wasn't it? I think that's right.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Probably you then. Probably you're going to get the knock on the door from the multicultural police.
Oh no.
Oh no!
I've transgressed the ideology.
Oh, you slagged off your diocese. Oh, sorry, no.
No, I didn't. I would never slag off my own diocese. Don't defecate where you eat, Tom. That is a.
So we did talk about net zero, didn't we? But we were careful about it. Anyway,
I'm not sure how careful I was. Or you.
There we are. Well,
no sins against the Holy Ghost.
Oh, yes. Good. Do you know it's they've actually passed that awful new festival, haven't they? Earth Week or whatever. Gaia Week.
Yeah. Gaia Worship Week.
Yeah. The new liturgy is coming out.
What do you mean? That's part of the liturgy of the Church of England now.
I think so. They passed it through Canon P2, ironically, because of course, that is usually for contentious things. So they put this new. Well, I think it's fairly ghastly. This creation tide thing in. I don't know.
Yeah.
And
that's like it's in November.
So presumably, it's sort of October, November, and presumably it sort of harvest time. Presumably will be published on sheep
nonsense. Creation tide. It's complete nonsense because the suffix tide surely indicates like something happening within the liturgical stories, doesn't it? So like Advent tide or Easter tide. It's about birth of Christ. I mean. Or the resurrection of Christ. Creation tide just means nothing.
No, exactly. And creation, to limit creation to just the seen world, the material,
exactly,
rather than the whole reality that God has created, of which we are a minuscule part. It seems like a theological home goal. I also think it's actually a slight against the farming community. The harvest was the big thing, wasn't it? And it's as if, well, we know this is what happens in certain circles, isn't it? That that the farming community are now seen as somewhat deplorable and not on message. So we're going to sort of limit harvest, that one sort of period of the autumn where the church actually has a real connection with local community, and create this kind of abstract creation tide, whatever that means.
But of course, we know what it's
signed by people who've never been outside.
Of course, it's been co-opted. In fact, it's already been co-opted. It's the whole point of it is to be co-opted by the net zero fanaticism in the
climate
Church
change ideology.
But, exactly, and particularly the claims around the fact that this is a climate emergency, and it'll all be about that. In fact, I saw quite a dry. Report on General Synod, which said, someone stood up to say this shouldn't be, partisan, and then 3 more people stood up to make completely partisan points about, diocese environmental officer after diocese environmental officer saying how we absolutely need to flagellate ourselves and, impoverish ourselves and freeze, and frankly, the whole thing is. Nonsense. It will be not. It will be poor liturgy because they can't write good liturgy about this sort of thing because it will be dreadful. All the theology I've ever heard about it has been dreadful. I had to do a 2-day thing on it once, and basically they stood up and misused the Bible left, right, and centre. You can just imagine what sort of resources there'll be. And how just ghastly they'll be because we've been to Cuddesdon and it was basically like that all the time. So pick up an acorn and go and pray or something.
Hold a stone.
Hold a stone.
Pour your feelings into it.
We're going to talk later about this Chris McBrain guy. What was his name? The guy was Chris Brain, the 9 o'clock service guy. That's when I was reading that. I was thinking it really reminds me of something, and then I thought, it's Cuddesdon. That's reminding me of this kind of like a combination of this rave style worship.
Anyway,
they do things like turn the chapel into a nightclub and like have a massive rave with prayers in it, and it'll be like, whoa, cool, man. Anyway, we should talk about that later because that's actually going to come up.
Nothing worse than a trendy vicar, is there? I mean,
no, trendy vicars are out. There is a trend of sexy vicars, though. I was talking to my wife about this the other day. I mean, obviously,
us three.
It's just obvious, isn't it? But with the TV, there's like, with the TV thing, they've got like Fleabag and that good-looking guy,
right.
the big jaw, a few others as well. Tom Hollander from Rev, he's quite handsome.
Is he quite good-looking? Also, I'm not sure. He's very short, isn't he? Yeah, you notice this in. I'm getting people are going to write in about my heightism or something. You notice this in the Night Manager don't you? When he plays corrupt ex-colonel. And he's so tiny.
But he's fearsome in that. He's very
fierce. He's very well, sort of drunk.
That's a really good adaptation. Although I have actually read the John le Carré novel, and it's quite different. It ends. The TV show ends positively, whereas the novel has this really bleak, dark ending.
There's a new series coming out, I think.
Of what? The Night Manager?
Oh yeah, the second series. I mean, it's obviously not based on anything by Le Carré, so it won't be as good. I suspect it will be a drop.
It is good though. That TV show. I mean, it's very tense.
I enjoyed it.
Lots of immorality in it though. So
there is a lot of immorality.
There's a lot of
some swearing as well.
Yes. Well, is swearing immoral? That's a good question. That's a good debate. I mean, Paul swears, doesn't he, in the Book of Philippians, or does he? That's another debate. Anyway, let's do some Bible reading, and then we can talk about some stories. Imagine it's going to be quite fluid today because we've got a few things to talk about. Luke chapter 14, verses 7 to 11 is the reading for today. So we'll have a read of this. Yes, I'll say the Lord's Prayer, and then we can read it. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive them that trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. Luke chapter 14, verse 7. This is Christ in the house of a ruler of the Pharisees. Now he told a parable to those who were invited, when he noticed how they chose the places of honor, saying to them, when you are invited by someone to a wedding feast, do not sit down in a place of honor, lest someone more distinguished than you be invited by him. And he who invited you both will come and say to you, give your place to this person, and then you will begin with shame to take the lowest place. But when you are invited, go and sit in the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he may say to you, friend, move up higher. Then you will be honored in the presence of all who sit at table with you. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. There's a scripture reading. I've just been writing my sermon upon this passage, literally just before we recorded. And I think one of the things that's kind of interesting to think about is the Christological angle of this, because obviously there's a truism about, not exalting yourself in a social situation. But, you've got the Pharisees, who this is obviously directed towards, who are taking the highest seat at the table, as it were, in a sort of spiritual sense. And then someone more distinguished than them has actually arrived, who is Christ, the Messiah, and they're unwilling to yield their position to him. So there's that kind of dynamic. And then there's also on the other side of it as well, go and sit in the lowest place so that when your host comes, he may say to you, friend, move up higher. And you can see there I suppose you could see sort of obliquely the incarnation in that image, Philippians 2, Christ, though he was in the form of God, did not take equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself, took the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men, and so on and so forth, becoming obedient to the point of death. Therefore, God has highly exalted him to, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, I was just thinking about that from the kind of Christological perspective. It's not just that Christ is telling us to humble ourselves in this life. It's actually that he demonstrates that humility himself in the incarnation. And then as a result of that, he is exalted by God. So I was kind of thinking around those themes for this passage. Don't know, you guys have any thoughts on that?
There's a continuation from last week. The scripture we had at our church picked up that whole, the Son of Man has come not to be served, but to serve. I find some of those scenarios quite interesting, living in a seaside town where the service industry is a big dimension, and you learn a lot from people. You learn a lot about the character of individuals, on how they treat baristas, restaurant staff, and so on. My own children have been for about 4 or 5 years worked in a beach cafe. You can get that type who doesn't look staff in the eye, and clicks their fingers, or moans about the tiniest thing, barks at people. In some ways, it's been really character forming for them because they've learned how to deal with some very bolshy characters. People who come with a certain sense of entitlement and tend to sort of bulldoze over others. That's been, in terms of their learning diversity, that's been really character forming. But you can see it in the church as well, that how easy it is, I think, particularly within Anglicanism, isn't it, to have for us to be a church of the well-to-do, and to create a culture within the congregational life where you think, if you came in and you were really you weren't of a certain sort of social class and stuff, you might have to work a lot harder to fit in. I've got one parishioner who comes in, it sort of comes in once, twice a month. He's a real sort of core blimey Cockney. And he's got no filter. Phil just says it as it is. And I think some of my parishioners find it a little bit difficult. It's a danger, isn't it, as congregations, that we end up closing off people and just becoming, I suppose this plays out particularly in Corinthians, isn't it? You become a very nice dinner party set.
There's always, I fight still against that sense here where the St. Bart's was the church the rich people went to. The poor people went to the congregational chapel that has now been knocked down. That was just the truth. That was, you go back 3 or 4 generations, that was definitely the case. Even 2 generations ago, that was persisting, and even now, like it left up with the St. Bart's being the church for the big houses on the high street.
Yeah, I see that here, that all the nonconformist chapels, churches that were in this town, I think there were about 4, and they're all closed now. They're all converted into flats. And the Methodist Church, I think, went around about the turn of the millennium. And so I think that the Church of England then has to kind of open its heart to those Christian communities that would otherwise feel they wouldn't fit in.
Yeah, and I think it's I have literally no idea, and maybe more because obviously, it's been a countrywide thing, but the decline of that sort of nonconformist chapel, sort of working class, it's a real loss to the country. I mean, you see that with Labour and their sort of rootless secularism now, whereas old Labour really were rooted in the nonconformist chapels, weren't they? That's where people what they were. But I wonder why it happened and what happened to it. I don't think we can be overly cheerful here. I mean, the Church of England's on the same route at the moment. Things change. Great revival, quiet revival.
Yeah. But we're probably living off the financial fumes of the great estates. But the money will inevitably run out unless we do something radical.
Was it money? I mean, but obviously money comes first from giving. I mean, these chapels were small and didn't employ full-time ministers. In fact, often it was, they just had the one particularly literate person who was effectively the minister.
I mean, it's in a country like Wales, nonconformity is completely gone.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just
so is conformity.
So is conformity. Yeah,
there's conformity.
Yeah. We spoke about the
and as you say, when you look at some deep dig statistical under the bonnet stuff in terms of who's voting for what. I mean, certainly the Labour Party now is the party of the sort of upper middle class. Though they would absolutely hate to be identified as that, and then but it is clear that them and the Liberal Democrats appeal largely to the professional caste.
Yes, indeed. Right. I think, chaps, we should move on and talk about a couple of news stories. I'm sorry I had to, if people are watching the videos, especially, they'll see that I had to exit the room because my family just got back and started creating, my children started creating absolute chaos. So I'm sorry I missed quite a lot of that, but yeah, good conversation. Let's talk about some stories. So I just wanted to make some brief comments because I listened to Alison Pearson's interview with Lucy Connolly. Now, we spoke a bit about Lucy Connolly last week because the Labour councillor, Ricky Jones, was found not guilty of whatever he was charged with. But, everyone knows what he did. He said that the Nazi fascist scum who were protesting the Southport murders should have their throats slit. And there was a lot of talk of two-tier justice and so on. Lucy Connolly was released from prison this week for she was in prison for doing her tweet, where she said various things. One of which was that the hotels of the where these illegal immigrants live could be burned down for all she cares and so on. Anyway, she was in prison for something like, was it 33 months or something like that? Quite a long time. So what's that, like a year and a half, just over a year and a half. She came out and she did an interview with Alison Pearson, the journalist from Telegraph, which it's about an hour long. But I just wanted to make brief comments on it, even though we talked about this quite a lot last week. I think the sort of ins and outs of the legal stuff we spoke about quite a bit. One of the things that comes across quite strongly in that interview is the way that she was really put in a pressurized position in which she really felt she had no option but to plead guilty to something she didn't believe herself to be guilty of, because she was convinced that was the quickest way to get out of prison because she'd been held on remand. So that in terms of the sort of two-tier justice thing, I think we did talk about this last week, didn't we, Tom? But that's where that comes in. It's not so much, the difference between jury trial, which Ricky Jones had, and the fact that she was just sentenced by a judge. It's that initial time where she was held on remand and then pressurized into pleading guilty. But I just found the whole thing, because they sort of went through the story, listening to it, I just found the whole thing sort of Kafkaesque, really. She did this tweet, she went out for a walk with the dog, she came back, deleted the tweet because she thought better of it. And then 8 days later, a load of police show up at her house and arrest her for a tweet. And then she's in prison. And then she's in prison for over a year and a half. It just strikes me as, I got in trouble once for a tweet. Nothing like that. But, when I was going through that, I was just thinking, like, what on earth is going on? Like, why is this happening because of a tweet? And for her, it must be, obviously a million times worse. But it's really disturbing that people in our country are being imprisoned for things like that. Really
and the political questions around this are also creepy, aren't they? Because I think what's come out in the last few days is that the state prosecutors have had instructions in that all these contentious tweets, they want to see all those. They want to be informed about the prosecutions and the sentencing, that they have a hand on that in a way that other misdemeanors wouldn't get that sort of on high involvement. And then there's been the sort of questions surrounding that. Well, if the Attorney General knew about the heavy-handed sentence that was going to be put upon this woman, surely the Prime Minister would have known. And then you begin to go into the ministerial code of conduct about the impartiality that ministers are meant to have over the judiciary. But, at the very least, it seems like a command went from on high, right from the top, saying, throw the book at people like this.
Well, it did. It did, didn't it? Publicly, Starmer gave that speech where he said, I guarantee you people will be held on remand, prison sentences will be handed out, and so on and so forth.
Now, I think it's the question, Jamie, is whether that conversation, how that conversation off camera happened. Was there a lot of back and forth?
Well, does there even need to be once that speech has been given in public? It's kind of like a command anyway, isn't it? That's the expectation of the Prime Minister. You've got all these activist judges who are politically inclined to do this kind of thing anyway. So, it would definitely have an influence, wouldn't it? I would have thought the Prime Minister saying something like that in public. And if the judges support him politically, they'll want to do what he says, right? And technically, he shouldn't be saying any of that stuff because he's not in a position. He shouldn't be in a position to be saying people will be held on remand and prison sentences will be handed out, because that's the role of the judiciary to decide. Police.
Well, no, it's a little bit more complicated than that, isn't it? The remand stuff would be the police and the prosecution services, which are political. So, I mean, he was the head of the CPS, wasn't he? Which is the Crown, and isn't independent from
political in what sense?
In the
sense that the Prime Minister has an involvement in how they're run.
The head of the CPS would be a political appointment, I think. It's not. It's appointed by the government.
Okay, but in such a way as the government is in control of what they do.
Not in control, but they certainly have. The CPS is the Crown, is part of the Crown, and the government, of course, it runs the Crown. So there is a I don't know, day-to-day operational matters, maybe not, but they can certainly set tone. So, for example, guidelines go through the relevant minister. I think. I might be wrong. People correct me, but I think that the sort of guidelines can be published by the government.
It doesn't seem to me to be a legitimate thing to do in any case. I mean, it's the kind of thing that happens in a banana republic, isn't it? That the Prime Minister goes on the TV and says, "Well, this is how it's going to be." I mean, surely we have a separation between the judiciary, the police, and the government for this reason, to stop this kind of thing.
I think if you had a freedom of information request around this that could somehow draw out what were the backroom conversations, I still think that it's likely that there were lots of backroom conversations and said, we're going to have to make some public examples of people. And yes, it does sound like a banana republic, or, think of Joseph Stalin, like nothing better in the morning than to have printouts of executions to which, he would pencil in little comments on the side, saying what particular form and add a few names to it, and then give it back to his officials while he's having his egg and soldiers.
Yeah. I mean, that was one of the things that came across. I mean, obviously, we're not quite at that stage really at all, but the thing that came across to me was like the cruelty of what happened to Lucy Connolly. Like the judge said that the judge made this kind of political speech before he sentenced her, where he said, something like diversity is one of our strengths, and condemned, racism and all this kind of stuff. Even though there was a mountain of evidence that Lucy Connolly is not, in fact, a racist. And then he said that the purpose of the sentence would be to punish and deter. So this was his justification for it being really harsh. And to me, that's just, I mean, it's like she's a mother of a small child. She's got all these mitigating factors, like she lost a child herself. She had post-traumatic stress. She had excellent character references. She, looked after children from a variety of backgrounds, many of whom were immigrants in her role as a childminder. None of that was taken into account. And it was just like, you are going to be made an example of. You're going into prison for over 1.5 years for a tweet. It's so cruel, so heartless, I thought. Sorry, Tom, you want to say something?
Yeah, I would say that there is a certain amount of truth in the idea that punishment is a deterrent. We want it to be a deterrent to criminals, of course. The point is that it was being deployed against free speech in this case, which is the issue. Yeah,
exactly. It's a deterrent against saying things which are politically anathema to certain segments of the elite class, isn't it? It's like what's actually being deterred here. It's to stop people speaking their mind about these issues, isn't it?
I mean, years ago there was an art installation in a gallery, I think Liverpool, which had the Holy Bible being, used as toilet paper, and with a toilet unit and the Bible going down the loo. Excrement kind of painted on and all this sort of stuff. No one was ever, nothing, we don't have blasphemy laws, so there's no prosecution, and people go around at art evenings, looking at it and muttering, oh, how intelligent is that?
Yeah.
If you took a picture of that and put that online, is that a hate crime? Well, I think I bet my best bottom dollar if you put that of other religious texts.
Yeah. We do.
You would have PC Blod and a whole series of other people at your door within hours.
These are blasphemy laws. That's it, isn't it? It's like we have blasphemy laws. They're just not called blasphemy laws. You can blaspheme against political ideologies, and you can blaspheme against certain religions, particularly Islam. But you can't blaspheme illegally anyway against Christianity. That's why I go backwards and forwards with the free speech thing, because I mean I do believe in free speech. I think it is the hallmark of a free society. But I do think that there should be restrictions on public speech. And I think in a Christian nation, obscene speech, like obscenely blasphemous speech, would be illegal. I wouldn't want people to be thrown into prison. I would just want it to be banned, and certain things to be banned in public, and that may very well be a candidate for it. I don't think people should be made martyrs for these things, and I don't think it'd be just. But I think the point I'm making is that in every society, certain types of speech and ideas are promoted, and certain types are illicit. I mean, you can't get away from it. I don't think you really can have freedom of speech in that kind of full sense. Maybe you can, I don't know, but that's just my sort of feeling about it. So anyway, so those are some brief comments about Lucy Connolly. Some other stuff that's been going on this week. I mean, this is really sad. So this is reported in the Telegraph that the King Alfred School in Dudley, which is the classical Christian school that we've actually advertised on this podcast a number of times, has been forced to close. So it charges. So I think what's happened is because of the exemption to the VAT on school fees being removed, this has meant that the amount that parents have had to pay at the school have increased. I think it was from £4,000 to £7,200, and obviously because these parents are not the kind, they're not wealthy people on the whole. They can't afford the increase in fees. So so the King's School in Dudley is closed down. Really, really sad news.
Well, we knew it was going to happen.
Hope that a new government will reverse all of this.
Yeah, it would be good. Sorry, Tom, what were you going to say?
I was going to say it's very sad and entirely predictable, isn't it? It's the smaller places that are going to suffer for poorer because it's Eton can absorb these losses and people are rich together anyway.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that in those kind of schools. I imagine the fees are being the VAT is being passed on to the parents. So, but as you say, Tom, most of the people who go to those schools can afford to pay more in fees because it's not an issue for them. But there's a map on the Telegraph article of the schools that have closed since the VAT raid. And we're talking, there are 2 in Scotland, but in Britain, well, there are a few in Wales, but in Britain there are maybe 20 or something, maybe more, 25. In fact, there looks like there's loads in London. So it's probably more than that. But I mean, it is just, it's hard to see it as anything else but a vicious assault on the middle class. And that's what, and it's not even necessarily like that middle class to send your kids to like a private Christian school. There's one here down the road. These are the people who are going to not be able to afford to send their kids to school. It's not, as you just said, Tom, it's not the wealthy. It's those people who can only just afford it, who will have to take their kids out and do something else, like put them in state school or home educate them or whatever. But I felt very sad about that. I did actually send a message to Tom, the principal, and he said he'd come on the podcast at some point, but he's away on holiday at the moment. So it'd be interesting to get his take on it and to hear the inside story.
Yeah.
Yeah, really sad. Really sad.
But one suspects that at the end of this, we're going to find out that this tax raid generated less money, generated probably a deficit.
That's the thing about this government. Don't seem to care about that. They don't seem to care that these things produce, because taxes change behaviour, right? So it was only ever going to choose. and they don't care whether a tax is justice or whether it's actually going to raise money. They just care about forcing their view of society on us through every means possible. And one of those is they can't abide private schools. They can't abide. I suspect they can't really abide any sort of education that isn't state controlled.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's about the state being in control of people's education, so that children can be conditioned in the way that the government and the ideologues in charge desire. And obviously these kind of schools are, they're apt to be targeted. I think another thing that's so sad about this was really like a flagship school, and other people might have been looking at this thinking, oh, this is a really good model for education. It was genuinely pioneering in this country. The classical Christian model is very big in America, and there's no reason why it couldn't be big here as well. But now this has happened, people will be looking at this thinking, well, this just can't work here. So yeah, in that sense, it's a very successful assault on a fledgling form of education.
The irony is they could probably open it in Dubai quite successfully.
Yeah. Well, their kids in Dubai need Christian education, I'm sure. Not sure if is it legal to do that kind of thing in Dubai? Is it an Islamic country?
I suspect it's easier. Even if it's not.
Yeah, probably. Meanwhile, Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, has been in the news this week. She's actually the Housing Secretary as well. And as Housing Secretary, she thought to herself, you know what I like is houses. And so she has purchased an £800,000 seafront flat in Hove, which adds to her existing properties, which are a constituency home in Ashton-under-Lyne and a Grace and Favour flat in Admiralty House, London. So now she's got 3 houses. Very good.
I think it's a little bit unfair to claim the Grace and Favour house as hers. It's not hers. She gets to live in it in order to do her duties, doesn't she? But
well, I mean, is it you? That's why you live in your house, Tom.
Yes.
Do you need 2 extra houses?
No. But
so, in what sense is it unfair?
Well, it's unfair to call because if she ceases to be the whatever she is, what would you say, housing community minister, then
housing secretary.
Then she needs somewhere to live, right? Would we be expected for her to, because remember it's only another 3 years. It's not like she's got a whole lot. Hopefully, I suspect at this moment some reformed politician will be moving into their not reform. It'd be nice if they were reformed as well, but I doubt it.
Yeah, this is quite pedantic though, Tom, isn't it? I mean, the point here isn't whether or not that's her home. It's the fact that the government are imposing 100% council tax premium on second homes.
Not the government. They've allowed councils to do that, so councils have the choice. But yes, okay, go on.
Well, it's a government decision, isn't it? I mean, why are you being an apologist for the Labour?
Well, because I've learned to be fair to her. Like, let's be honest. She has a house.
You're being an apologist.
No, I'm not. She has a house. She has another house which is given to her for her work. Which she can live in there, but that's not her main accommodation. She lives at home with her family, I presume, and she's bought a second home in Brighton.
Yeah, that's exactly why the government have engineered this situation where council tax, 100% council tax premium is being charged on second homes. It's in order.
Well, she'll presumably have to pay that.
It's in order to stop people doing this very thing that she's doing.
Well, that's not again
blatant hypocrisy.
We have to, but it's not the government. The government have allowed councils to have 100% council tax. They don't require it. They don't here, for example. You can have a second home in this part of the country without paying 100%.
Well, I don't really see why that's relevant, Tom. If they've allowed it,
I suppose you could say the government could pull the handbrake on that piece of legislation.
They could. But if it's more about councils making more money because they're all skint, isn't it? So if it's more about trying to make money out of people to have more money, which normally by definition having 2 homes is, and you can also avoid the council tax, or if you're renting it out, for example, then you don't have to pay that. I don't know, Jamie. I think it's a little bit unfair to because she's only really got 1 home and she's bought a second home, and I don't really see what the hypocrisy is.
You can't see the hypocrisy in engineering a situation in which people are going to be charged 100% premium council tax on their second home, and then the person.
It'd be hypocrisy if she didn't have to pay that. But
well, no. Sorry, it's not. You're missing the point, Tom. It's not about whether or not you have to pay it. It's about the end in which they have in mind, which is to stop people having second homes in places like Hove and countryside, and seaside towns like the place where Daniel lives.
I suspect
that's what they're trying to do.
Again, it's a per council choice. So if one council wanted to invite people with second homes, they could drop the council tax on it. Another council,
it's not. It's irrelevant. It's about the intention of the government. Which I don't think the government
I think the government's main thing is to allow local. I actually agree with local councils being given the right to raise taxes however they want, because people are reasonably flexible. If they're, if Salcombe wants to build up a better local home for people who live there, then they can put on their second houses, almost as granularly as you want, put an extra tax on it so that people are forced to sell up or rent out to local people at a reason, if the house down the road, if the people down the road want the income from second home owners, they can drop that and not charge it. It's I don't know. Go on, Daniel.
Yeah, no, I think what will happen is that middle earners will sell up their houses to higher earners. So somewhere like Salcombe becomes even more elite because the cost, it's just too high a barrier for local families to be able to afford houses that are in the 800 to £1 million margin. They're never going to be those properties unless there's some radical way that people can get extraordinary mortgages, or the cost of living rises. There's no way they can ever reach that stratosphere. So what I think doubling of council tax will do, I'm not sure if this has happened in the South Hams, but I suspect what it would happen is it would just make it even more like a sort of Monaco, and push out the ability. And those are sort of properties that, in the end, if you get this sort of super upper class wealthy owning a lot of stock, they're unlikely to rent it because they're too rich to rent.
Yeah, and I agree the tax might be unwise, but I don't actually see hypocrisy here, especially if she's actually paying it.
This is so ridiculous. Your line of argument. The government has been conducting a war on the middle classes of this country ever since they came in, and this is one iteration of it. At the same time as doing these things, I mean, we just talked about two things just now. I mean, you could mention various other things like the persecution of farmers, for example. But at the same time as carrying out this class warfare, you have the Deputy Prime Minister buying an £800,000 seafront flat in Hove. Can you not see why some people might think that's hypocritical? Why that's not a double standard?
What's the double standard precisely?
The double standard is, on the one hand, they're conducting a class war against the middle class, but on the other hand, they're just going around enriching themselves, buying second homes, using their positions in order to garner advantage for themselves.
I don't think that's obvious.
It's like something out of Soviet Russia. I don't understand why would you look at these people and think, oh no, it's fair enough. This is completely reasonable behavior. It's hardly like the action of
So are we trying to say that?
So it's not the actions of a woman of the people, is it, to go and buy £800,000 seafront flat in Hove? I mean, Labour is supposed to be the party of the working class.
Right? Yeah, but.
Why does she need an £800,000 seafront flat?
Are we saying that no one should have £800,000 seafront flats, Jamie?
No, I'm saying that there are moral implications of your political position, particularly if you're the Deputy Prime Minister.
I don't think they've said that people shouldn't have second homes. I think they've said those with second homes should pay more, but
isn't behind that the emphasis is to discourage the purchase of second homes.
Well, possibly, or just to push some more of the cost of running council services onto those who are wealthier, because by definition, if you've got a second home, you're probably wealthier. So it's a reasonably targeted house. So a tax, in as much as those who have only one house or who are renting are not are not going to be owning second homes. Those who have got second homes, who can afford just to keep them empty to use as holiday destinations, i.e. aren't renting them out as a sort of private landlord or whatever, are then asked to pay slightly more because they're likely to be in a position where
they're asked to pay twice as much, and many of them won't be able to afford that. Many of them will just be able to afford what they could afford previously.
Okay,
they have to sell their houses, and then you've got the Deputy Prime Minister going and buying one.
Do you
not think you'd be annoyed, Tom, if you owned a flat by the seaside and 100% tax was imposed upon it and you had to sell it, and then
you'd have a choice. Your choice is basically, and I know I've got a few friends who do this, you can rent it out a few weeks a year in order to make the tax back, in which case you're bringing things into the economy when you're not there. You could rent it out full time. And therefore you're not paying the council tax, and it doesn't come under the extra thing anyway.
Why should you have to? Why should you be taxed for your home at all in this way? It's your home. Why should the government?
It's not your home. It is your home.
Not your home, Tom. Honestly, it's not you're sounding like some kind of like socialist ideologue. I can't believe what I'm hearing.
It's not your home if you're not living in it. It's a holiday home.
It's not your home. If you own it, it's not your home unless you're living.
What does a home mean? Okay, so it's not your primary residential property, is it? It's not. It's
still your home. It's still your property. You've still got a right to earn it and not to be taxed out of owning it by the government.
Well, like I said, there are a number of different ways you could deal with it.
Oh, Tom, honestly, this is socialist ideology you're spouting.
Unless you're going to claim that taxes shouldn't be levied against anyone for the services of a local council, I'm not quite sure what the argument against it is.
Well, there has to be some kind of justification for imposing 100% tax on somebody's home when they're already paying tax on it. That's what I'm saying. Like tax of this sort. I mean, it's just theft.
It's in order to attempt to reduce the attractiveness of buying second homes and pushing residents out of. And I don't know, it's a good one, but the intent is to make more affordable property prices, because the bubbles are often to do with second home holiday houses that are often empty. And this is an attempt to either get them being used as through more of the year, I guess, as holiday accommodation for more people, in which case you wouldn't become eligible to that extra tax, or to force you to allow to start to prick some of these local coastal town bubbles and enable people who actually live there to afford property. Now, probably that doesn't work very well. Daniel's already explained why, but I'm not sure I'm absolutely against that intent, because it is a little bit unfair on the Cornish, for example. They could never. In a beautiful, fishing village. I think I saw Port Isaac as an example of this the other day, where like only 30 residents actually live there. The people who work there can't afford to live there anymore because it's become so popular that the bubble has exploded the prices of property in Port Isaac. But they don't actually live. The people who bought these houses don't only use them sort of 6 weeks a year. So most of the time, Port Isaac is a ghost town. Which doubles down. So the whole point is to try and think, are there any ways that we can help the local people actually own homes, or at the very least discount their council taxes, because by levying on those who can afford it by definition, because they have a second home.
They can't afford it by definition. That's just nonsense, Tom. You can't say they can afford it by definition. You don't know what their margins are.
If you've got a second home, you can sell it, Jamie, and therefore you don't have to buy it, or you can rent it out.
That's the definition of not being able to afford it, isn't it?
Or you can rent it out. Oh, yeah, but I mean, are you really going to the wall here?
You sound like one of these people who are saying that these farmers can just sell their buildings to pay their.
No, that's ridiculous. I wouldn't say that.
That's exactly the same thing. You're saying the taxes can be imposed upon people and they can afford it by selling their property. It's exactly the same thing.
But no, I said there are other things. Either they can afford to sell it, or they can let it out as an Airbnb, or as a long-term rental to someone locally who wants to live there all the time. I feel quite sorry for coastal communities that have been destroyed essentially by London property bubbles, and this is at least an attempt to sort that out. Anyway,
well, even if that's true, it's still not a great look for the Deputy Prime Minister to then go and buy one of these properties, which she will not be living in most of the time, when she has two other residents.
She's paying the levy, isn't she? So she's putting £5,000.
Yeah, but that is hypocrisy, Tom. That's like these green fanatics who go on about how people shouldn't fly on a plane, but they will offset their carbon footprint when they fly on a plane by paying for it. It's like she can afford it, right? But but other people might not be able to, so they have to sell their property. And as for this thing, I really think you should address that comment you made earlier when you said these aren't people's homes. Of course, they're their homes. They own this. They own these properties. They've they may have worked very hard to afford them. You can't just say they're not people's homes just because they don't.
I think there's a definite. Well, I mean, we're using home can mean many things, can't it? That's what is owned by them, but it's not their primary residential house.
Well, it's none of the business. It's none of the government's business whether or not people live. When
okay, but I once again, I ministered in Sandbanks in Poole for my curacy, which cry for me by all means. But it was a ghost town most of the year, and local people. And there were people who were born and bred on Sandbanks. It had a community before it was taken over by the super rich. There were some Coast Guard cottages and members of our church who were born in them. There was a terminal there's some work from a flying boat as well. So there were people living there in small and quite modest properties until it became a bit of a property boom. And the property boom was entirely by super rich looking for beachside properties through the second half of the 20th century. And most of the time that place was a ghost town because they just had these huge houses empty, and it did nothing for the local community. It did nothing for the church. It did nothing for anyone. When they were there, they didn't tend to spend money on buying beachside ice creams, did they? They had their private beaches and their private boats, and they entertained people privately, and I'm sure they employed people. But I actually don't have too much of a problem with them having to pay twice as much council tax, so that those who actually have to live there year in, year out can pay less. Doesn't bother me.
I think it's interesting culturally how we have a very different, almost negative take of this in comparison to, say, France, where second home ownership doesn't have this stigma, and I believe it's not as costly, but because it strikes me that in the end it's the cost of the houses that are alienating ordinary people from being able to afford to snap up houses and stay in communities like Poole and Salcombe, because it's just unaffordable. I'm not sure that a council tax hike will make any difference. In fact, I suspect it will make it worse. And the problem is if you decimate the second holiday homeowner community, you end up with no local you end up with no local economy.
So I agree, Daniel. I think you're right. I think you're right in that this is a badly targeted tax, but I don't think it's necessarily a tax. I don't think the aim is wrong. I'm not sure quite what the aim is, other than, I mean, if it's a supply side thing, then build more beautiful medieval coastal villages, I guess.
The aim is ideological, like it is with everything else of this government. You can't divorce this from the overall strategy of the government, which is purely ideological.
Maybe.
And I think
it's also very different from old Labour, where you had someone like Margaret Beckett who caravanned around Britain, and that was sort of part of a kind of a class culture. I suppose what I'm saying is that in somewhere like France, working class culture for a long while has been quite acceptable to have like a small flat in the seaside. We've kind of turned this into second home ownership is a bad thing, but it's good for the building community. It's good for all sorts of.
I think it can be a good thing. I do see a rationale in there about these like Port Isaac, like other very attractive coastal villages where people who are born and want to work there can't actually live there.
No, I get that.
Entirely because it's become attractive to a certain wealthy Londoner who go there for 6 weeks a year.
Yeah, like Angela Rayner.
Yeah, but at least make the Londoners pay.
Yeah, but the people who are able to pay can keep their homes. It's the people who can't afford to pay who have to sell their homes. It's exactly the same thing.
I wonder how many people you're worrying about here, Jamie, because it's not that many people who have. I mean, it's not every council. It's on a. As I said, it is on a individual district council level. They get the right to choose how much council tax they pay, and therefore, I mean, they can if they wish, that if it doesn't work, the next town can capitalize on the people fleeing one by dropping their council tax, maybe, or not levying it.
I mean, I think the main thing here is the hypocrisy of the deputy prime minister buying one of these houses, an £800,000 house, when this charge has been levied on people and made it unaffordable for people to keep their homes in these towns. That's the hypocrisy, Tom.
Okay,
because she can afford to.
Because you can afford to. Yeah. So it's basically, it's okay if you've got enough money, but if you don't have enough money, or if this is pricing you out of being able to own your second home or your flat or whatever, then you will lose it. So it's basically a tax. Once again, it's a tax on not on the elite class, but on the middle class, on the aspirational middle class, which is why it's an ideological thing, and it's a particularly vicious ideological thing as well, because we're talking about people who are, can afford to have, as Daniel said, like flats in seaside towns or small houses. I know people like this. Don't have that myself, obviously, but to target these people is basically to target the aspirational middle class. So it is ideological, and it is hypocritical. I mean, I don't see how you can say it's not hypocritical.
I think it's also interesting how it's one of those luxury goods which doesn't have necessarily the sort of political slur on it. Whereas if currently if Labour cabinet members all sent their children to private school and had private health, I think the spotlight would be a lot more on them than property purchasing isn't as controversial as those other two items.
Yeah, that's good analogy there. Tom, do you want to have the last word on this?
No, I'm all right.
I've shouted at you quite a lot, so you
it's all right. No, it's fine. It's fine. I would like to, moderate the criticism of Angela Rayner to a degree here. I don't think she's necessarily hypocritical or necessarily doing anything particularly bad here. I don't know. If we find videos of her slating off second homeowners as part of her campaign, then I'll reassess. But I think just simply owning a second home and paying an extra tax is not dreadful.
Okay, all right. Shall we move on? Tom, I'm
going to have to go in a second. I would quite like to address quickly Chris Brain before, and then maybe you can swing back to the.
So do you want to just give a brief for people who don't know about this story?
Well, Christopher Brain, this is the sort of overview. I think you've provided it from Grok here, haven't you? By the looks of it, or I don't know. Chris Brain was Christopher Brain was a former priest in Sheffield who ran a very trendy 9 o'clock service, the NOS in Sheffield, and was licensed in Sheffield. And it turns out that his 9 o'clock service, which was in many ways very successful on the surface, was in fact rife with serious safeguarding issues, including his. I don't know quite how he got away with this. Anyway, his home-based team, nicknamed the Lycra Lovelies or the Lycra Nuns, who were tasked with caring for him, including doing massages that evolved into non-consensual sexual acts, despite Brain, I keep wanting to read it as Brian, claiming consent. Basically, he used his power and position as a Church of England minister as a charismatic and appearing to be successul. And there's some very weird pictures of him on the Telegraph, aren't there? Sort of, that he does look very culty. In
like kind of white flowing robes, holding up, the host and
the bread.
With his arms outspread, and in this kind of nightclub scene where you've got people like women in bikinis dancing around him, and it's really, really weird.
And I think the church plant had come out of a fairly successful
evangelical church, St. Thomas's
evangelical church, isn't it? And Brain's project very quickly moved away from Orthodox Christianity to all sorts of very sort of bizarre melange of New Age stuff and nightclub rave culture and whatnot.
And so there's like, as with all these things, there are warning flags that have been missed a number of times, haven't there? I mean, there's not enough oversight through the church's structures, not from St. Thomas's Church, St. Thomas's Crooks, not from the bishop, not from the archdeacon, all of whom. This weird quote from Stephen Lowe, who's the Archdeacon of Sheffield. Lowe's alleged response to Brian's admission of abusing up to 40 women, Brain's admission, was, "I thought it was more," which is a weird thing for him to say. You know what? And it looks like Brain was fast-tracked through ordination training.
Do we know where he was trained? So, information doesn't seem to be available.
No, maybe if he searched.
I've got a book on the whole thing somewhere at home, but I have a funny feeling it was a part-time night school course.
Right. Okay.
Anyway, so she was she basically raised concerns which were overruled. So there were plenty of times that they could have been avoided. The main thing that could have avoided all of this nonsense is, of course, to stay to Bahukama prayer services and not go down into trendy weirdness, because I don't think it ever really goes well.
Does the Book of Common Prayer not allow for a bit of strobe lighting and some smoke machines? I don't know. Maybe you could read it.
I think, strictly speaking, that everything needs to be reverently said and loudly. I believe those are rubrics: reverently and loudly. Certainly in morning and evening prayer.
Yeah.
And in the place where the communion is normally offered, so in a church building, which I think would mitigate against most of the things which are happening here.
It doesn't mention young women in bikinis. That's.
No.
I mean,
maybe we could call this podcast episode "The Life of Brain."
Now that's a great. I mean, we will. I mean, that's
it now. Well done.
Call it "The Life of Brain." I was thinking about Brian when Tom said that thing. I was thinking it's a bit like Brian. It is a bit like Brian, isn't it?
He's not the Messiah. He's a very naughty boy.
I mean, the extraordinary court transcripts where he seems so nonchalant and not bothered, and then up his own backside when he's going on about, "Oh well, I was the most important priest in the country."
Yeah, he said.
I mean, at 68, to not have that amount of self-reflection.
Yeah, there's a bit where he's accused of psychobabble, isn't it? I'm trying to find it. It is even in the courtroom.
Yes, the prosecution went for the jugular at that point.
Yeah, even in the courtroom, he's still talking in this sort of patois, psychobabble.
He's obviously been defrocked or something. When was he defrocked?
I think it was in the 90s. I think it was later.
He's still on Crockford's clerical directory. We could find out more.
Yeah, we could. I mean, one of the things I wondered about this is it was like, obviously I was unaware of it when it was happening. So I was very young, but it just seems to me like it's one of those things where the church sees this thing, which is very much like the world. It appears to be bearing fruit. And so they just like throw caution to the wind and say, well, because it sort of suits our way of thinking about it, we'll support this thing, even to the extent where it must have been fairly obvious that things were going on. Nevertheless, you've got all these bishops and so on. I mean, who was involved? David Lunn, Bishop of Sheffield, Robert Warren, Canon and Team Rector of St. Thomas Church Crooks, and then the Archdeacon, who we've already mentioned.
So when concerns were raised, again, Lunn rebuked whistleblowers, accusing them of starting a witch hunt.
Oh my goodness!
When people were alleging sexual abuse, alleging non-consensual sexual acts and these sort of things, the Bishop of Sheffield appears to have just dismissed these concerns out of hand. And I know, like that was in the old days where safeguarding wasn't such a massive thing as it's sort of become now. But even then, surely people were aware of the fact that things like this happen, and that if you've got this guy with an enormous sort of cult-like following and he's living with loads of young women, and surely some alarm bells are going off somewhere.
Yeah, and again, 1991, it was his ordination. And it looks like he resigned in 1995. So I mean, it was not a long ministry of the Church of England. But which is the length of a curacy. I mean,
he achieved a lot in 4 years. I mean, if he used it for good, his entrepreneurial skills, I mean, he's very organised. This home-based team, he had it all organised very, very neatly.
Well, it looks like he had it beforehand. So reports of being surrounded by young women were there. Reverend Marilyn Parry comes out quite well of this, who was his tutor. She refused to sign off on his ordination due to his absences, missed deadlines, and reports of being surrounded by young women. But the principal overruled her, allowing Brain to become a priest with minimal scrutiny. This is just like, there is a reason that we have things like proper curacies and a year as a deacon and proper oversight and training incumbents, because they're supposed to catch people like this, hopefully before they're ordained and in position of power, but at least, once they become a deacon. Because you're supposed to be able to stand up to your bishop and say, this person has served and has demonstrated good character. I don't think anyone really justly could say that.
There was also not always reported as much, but there was an extraordinary amount of financial abuse. I mean, he was putting the spiritual thumbscrews on a whole load of individuals to not just tithe, but essentially hand over huge swells of. I mean, people were mortgaging their houses.
Gosh, wow!
To raise funds for the kit for this, and there was that extraordinary part of the story, isn't it, where he wants to dress in Robert De Niro's cassock from the Mission.
Yeah.
So they purchase it at the price of £10,000 from some agent in LA or wherever. And people's livelihoods were put on the edge from this, as well as the horrific sexual impropriety. And he's there in court, 68, kind of all very nonchalant about the whole thing, and just being misunderstood.
Yeah, exactly. Well, he still thinks he's like the man, doesn't he? I was just trying to
find life of Brain.
I was just trying to think that. Oh yeah, here we are. In court, Brian described NOS as an evolving experiment at the peak of the rave boom, which embraced club culture by creating a natural ecstasy. He said it was, quote, celebrating sexuality, and praised external influences from Buddhism, left-wing activism, and chakras. As part of the new age, he endorsed positive sexuality and tantric celibacy. Tim Clark, KC, for the prosecution, told him, "You speak psychobabble to get your own sexual gratification."
There's loads of warning points, aren't there? Like, he moves. NOS was formed in the 1980s after Brain and his ex-wife Lynn, known as Winnie, moved from Harrogate to Sheffield. At the time, and you're thinking, did they not, interrogate this relationship? Because one of the things we're required to do as ministers is to mould our home lives under. To the same expectations of the Bible, which is just, it's a very serious thing to be ordained. I mean, it's possible as a divorcee, but it's taken quite seriously.
Was he divorcee then?
Well, it looks like it was. It says when.
I thought he was divorced later.
Was he? Maybe. It says.
I don't know.
Well, why would you call him ex-wife?
Well, because she's now his ex-wife, I think.
Okay, maybe.
I think so. I'm not sure. I think he was still married while all of this stuff was going on. That was my sort of feeling.
Okay, maybe it's a little bit yeah.
Even so, can someone explain to me what tantric celibacy is? I mean, I just don't know what that's supposed to mean. Not that I'm interested in it, whatever it is.
He used to tell people that they couldn't be spiritual without being sexual, and that they should use their healing gifts to massage him.
That's a classic move, isn't it? Yeah. No, terrible stuff. Hey, listen, we should probably move on to our question.
I've got to head off. Thank you ever so much, Jamie.
Thank you, Tom. And obviously, I enjoyed our debate as always.
Always enjoy. People are gonna, think.
There's no hard feelings when we have these debates. It's cathartic for us. Get some of the energy out.
See you all soon.
Yeah. God bless, Tom.
Bye. God bless. Goodbye.
All right, Daniel. Quick 8-minute question. The Rev.
Yeah, go on.
Let's do it. Well, so here we are. We're doing Question the Rev now. These are actually questions that were sent in by our supporters on Patreon. We were going to do them on our bonus podcast uncollared, but there was so much to talk about, we ran out of time, so we're going to do them now. But if you would like to support the podcast, please do go to our website, revpod.com, click on the big red button and become a supporter today. It only costs £2.50 plus VAT in the UK per month. You get our bonus podcast, Uncollared, and you get all the episodes early, etc., etc., etc. And you get to support us, which is great because it costs money to run the podcast. I live off the money I make podcasting and writing. So it really, really does help. Please do go to our website, revpod.com. Here we go, Daniel. So this has got to be quick because now we've only got 7 minutes. This is Rosemary. My church is strongly evangelistic, which is great, but it leaves me grappling with the problem of what in the Bible to take literally and what not. I don't believe that God made the world in 6 days, or that Jonah spent 3 days in a whale's belly, or that Methuselah died aged 969. But where do I stop? I think that's supposed to say. I'm not really sure what the link there is between evangelism and taking the Bible literally, but what's your?
I suppose what they're saying is that in evangelistic conversations, it might sound like a hard sell.
Okay, yeah, okay. So when somebody comes back to you when you're trying to share the faith with them, and they say, "Well, do you take the Bible literally?" and you say, "Well, no," but then you don't really have an answer as to what to take literally and what not. So I guess that's where she's going with that. I mean,
what do you think, Jamie? My thought is to believe in essence what the church fathers, the early church, I think, was much better at this than we are now. They had a sense of where these lines are, where what we can see as allegorical, metaphorical, all those sort of gradations. That they clearly had a lot of discerning on that.
Yeah.
And because particularly a lot of more reformed churches don't necessarily have that, not that they don't have the access, but they don't enjoy the early patristic part of the church. They're a bit disconnected from that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I certainly wouldn't want to sort of make it an absolutely unquestionable part of the faith that certain parts of the Bible need to be taken absolutely literally, with some exceptions. I think that you do run into problems when you start to allegorize things like the resurrection and things like that. But as you say, if you look at the patristic inheritance around, Genesis, for example, Genesis was read in a variety of different ways by the patristic fathers. So some would have taken it in a way that we would call literal. Others, like Augustine, although he wrote a book called On the Literal Interpretation of Genesis, what he means by literal and what we mean by literal is actually very different. He actually means, allegorical, really. So I just wouldn't insist on these things. I just say there are a number of ways to take this, and it's not an absolutely essential part of the faith. The essential part of the faith to share evangelistically is Christ. That's what the Bible is, obviously a central part of Christianity, but Christianity is about Jesus. It's about Jesus Christ, his death, his resurrection, having faith in him, having a relationship with him. Obviously, the church is very important as well. But, I think making things, absolutely essential when they're not is not a great idea in evangelism.
And I think, you can look at the opening of the scripture in Genesis chapter 1, and it is not meant to be a sort of Newtonian scientific explanation of creation. It is a theological analysis, isn't it? It's a theological looking into the reasons for the creation, and particularly the reasons for the creation of human beings, of you and I. And one which sort of models, say, the liturgical life of Israel, and the way that the temple is divided out.
Yeah, for sure. Right, let's carry on. Lucy, I believe there were several national days of prayer during the Second World War, and that Churchill called for Parliament to adjourn to St Margaret's, Westminster, to give thanks to God on VE Day. Wouldn't it be a wonderful thing if the churches could do the same sort of thing now, so that we could pray en masse for the restoration of Christian principles in governance, with particular respect to the sanctity of human life, marriage and family life, and rights of parents to bring up and educate their children as they see fit? I think that's what they call a rhetorical question, isn't it, Daniel?
Yeah, because it's unlikely to happen in this generation on those terms, but because Christianity has become a counter-cultural movement. And so you're more likely to experience those sort of things, going on something like March for Life.
Yeah.
I think we can't expect at the moment the state to have explicit days of prayers for the evangelization of the country, as much as we'd love that to be the case.
Yeah, I mean, look at Danny Kruger's intervention in the House of Commons, where there were literally sort of 8 other people in the whole room. They'd have to be Christian themselves first. I mean, it relates to the next question, so I'll read this as well. I've contacted my MP before, have been ignored or told that they don't agree with me. How responsible are Christians, therefore, for the evil choices our governments make? When future generations ask why the church was complacent/complicit in these evils, the truth may be we did complain, we did protest, we were ignored. What do you think? I mean, so that's kind of raised the question a bit like you were saying there, Daniel. It's like, well, what should we actually do with stuff like, abortion or euthanasia probably coming down the line quite soon? There's a question there, isn't it? Is if you don't do anything about it, if you don't protest, if you don't write to MP or whatever, maybe you're complicit because you're apathetic and you should have done more. I suppose that's a legitimate thing to ask, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and in a way, we can say that we have little excuse now in the world with all the tools of social media.
Yep.
We clearly have opportunities to make our point, though, as we've also discussed in the podcast, understandably there are fears over freedom of speech. If I criticize in a comical way something or other, with a few words on Twitter, am I going to lose my job?
Yeah, exactly. And it kind of reminds me a bit of the Rod Dreher live not by lies stuff. That really, it's like, will we be in a situation when we even can intervene without being penalized in some way or even sent to prison in the future? And how do you negotiate that? Because you can make yourself a martyr very easily in situations like that, and lose your job or be put in prison or even in extreme cases be executed. So there's a question of prudence there as well, isn't there, I suppose? All right, one more. We've almost done it. Stephen, we have seen a lot of people raising the UK or English flag. Previously, they felt no need to do it. Has the introduction of multiculturalism made separate, not integrated communities, or separated, not integrated communities, and therefore people are isolated and feel the need to assert an identity, which was something previously not at all necessary for them? It's another.
I think there's a complicated answer to this, which is that certain communities, certain immigrant communities have assimilated very well, and in fact, enthusiastically well. We are not seeing problems with Ukrainians, or we're not seeing problems with Hong Kong
or with Polish people,
are we? But there are certain sections of the community, and particularly the new migrations, that have caused problems, and also that's kind of tallied up with a certain political class, for whom all this aggravation is fuel to the fire, and have always had a rather sort of poor relationship with patriotism, and have this sort of post-empire guilt thing that they have to sort of push. It's very kind of boomer-esque, isn't it? So we've got a certain section of the community for whom there's a real interest in not. But I think you'd find that if you went to Sikh communities, they'd happily raise the flag. Jewish communities, Hong Kong, Ukraine, Polish, quite, the Polish friends I know are more strident than me.
Yeah.
And they love being here, and they think we're wet rags for not ramping up on nationalism.
I think it comes down to the distinction, in my view, between multiculturalism and multi-ethnicism, or ethnicism isn't even necessarily the right word. It could be like multinationalism or something like that. I mean that's probably wrong actually. But what I mean is multiculturalism implies that you have all different cultures in your nation, right? So you've got many cultures within your society. Multi-ethnicism, which is probably the best word out of the ones I just mentioned. So, implies that there are many ethnicities, but one culture. And that's the problem is I think you need one culture. You need to, like in any country in the world, like in our country, it should be an English culture, in France, it should be a French culture, in Japan, it should be a Japanese culture. And if you have other ethnicities coming there, then they have to support and appreciate the culture. They don't have to be sycophantic, but they have to appreciate the fact that they're living in somebody else's culture, right? The idea that you can have many cultures, of course, it's going to create incohesion. I mean, I just walked through an area of London the other day, which I hadn't walked through before, just because I happened to be there and had a bit of time. And when I walked from one place, I was in a kind of white working class area. I walked from like one street to another. So I went from a white working class area to another area, not intentionally, by the way, but I was suddenly in an Islamic area. And so there, everyone's a Muslim. All the women are in like the hijab. All the men are in Islamic robes. All the signs are in Arabic. All the street signs are in Arabic. There are Islamic shops you've walked from one culture, a place where there's one dominant culture to another dominant culture. And in a situation like that, how can there be any kind of community cohesion?
Whereas if you'd have gone to Golders Green,
yeah,
I'm sure you'd see lots of Union Jacks around, and people would be very sort of happy to describe themselves as British and Jewish.
Yeah.
And it would have there would be certain religious, ethnic differences and that would be drawn out, but you wouldn't feel like, if I raise the flag here, this is going to go down really badly. I'm going to get a wide berth, or I'm going to get comments and pushback and what have you. I think it was Kemi Badenoch who said recently, isn't it, exactly the point you've just made, that and she's a Nigerian born conservative, that she doesn't believe in a multicultural society, but in a multiracial society, and that we should all be primarily British.
I think the question is like, how do you actually create a coherent multi-ethnic or multiracial society if you have as levels of immigration which are as high as we do? And is that actually possible, or is it only possible with lower levels of immigration?
Well, and also I think the previous communities that have come in as and immigrated have come with a link to the old British Empire.
Yes.
Whereas I think what you've got mostly now is people who don't have that. They don't have that heritage of feeling that this was the mother country to a larger project, which they could say, and we really love the Queen, and we maybe we even fought in the First and Second World Wars for king, country, and empire. If there isn't that heritage, if there isn't that deep memory, then I think you've got an issue. If you've got people coming, say, from Syria, Libya, Albania, what sort of cultural connection do they have with the great sort of Anglosphere that certainly was and still is in some respect with the Commonwealth, to a degree.
Yeah, completely agree. No, I think those are all valid points. Daniel, we've run out of time, so we'll finish there. Do you want to, have you got a prayer you could say for us?
Yeah, I was just trying to, let me get that prayer that Tom mentioned from Common Worship for for St. Augustine, which just bear with me a sec. Just as I need it, my online Church of England app has crashed.
I've probably got it here. It's probably
have you got it? Have you got it here?
It's probably in the Common Worship book. I just pulled it off my shelf. I don't.
Well, I think you better do it then, because my system's just broken down.
Yeah, no worries.
This is having an allergic reaction.
This is the analog. This is the analog version. All right, let us pray. Faithful God, who strengthened Monica, the mother of Augustine, with wisdom, and through her patient endurance encouraged him to seek after you, give us the will to persist in prayer, that those who stray from you may be brought to faith in your Son, Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
It's a good prayer. Very good. Daniel, thank you very much for your time, and thank you for being a calm interlocutor in the midst of Tom and my at times contentious conversation. Appreciate that.
Well, I mean, I think that's a first, isn't it, to have an argument about Angela Rayner and second homes.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, very good. All right, Daniel. Yeah. So I'm not here next week, so maybe we'll catch up in a couple of weeks. I hope everything goes well. Prayers for you.
Lovely.
Things are changing, and hope everything goes well in the coming weeks. And thank you to everyone for listening and for watching. Really appreciate it. Do check out our website, reverendpod.com, and support us if you possibly can. Until next time, keep watch
and keep the faith.